This is a pedestal base for a round table. It's for exterior use on a deck. African mahogany is the wood and it's glued with epoxy, and this is how we do it. We start with a blank that's 13 inches in diameter, cut it into an octagon and turn it around. Then we part off our first detail section, and then with our roughing gouge, take it down to its dimension. So the first detail we're going for is this cove. For this we use a detail gouge, and notice how the cut is made starting with the gouge on its side. Then without withdrawing, we rotate the left hand, the back hand, to the right. Next we're going to part off another section with the parting tool. Notice we move the tool rest. This will be one of many moves. We use the roughing gouge again to turn down to our next level. What we're working on here is the section above the cove in the base where that half-inch bead is. Here we're going to use our caliper to check dimension. Also, we've moved our tool rest again. Then we take that whole section down to that level. Again, we part off another detail section. That's my hand at the top there, using a 6-inch rule to check dimension. Then we rough that out. There's an awful lot of gradual stock removal to be done in this piece. And now we're getting close to shaping some more detail. What we're going to work on here is that large bead above the hourglass shape with the half-inch bead. There's a gradual cove just above that, which we do first with the detail gouge. And somewhat like before, we start the cut with the gouge on its side and rotate the left hand to the left, staying engaged with the tool. Now we shape this big bead with the 1-inch skew. This is a shearing cut and not a scraping cut. Get a much cleaner cut that way and have less sanding to do. See that hourglass shape we just below the bead we just did? We'll work on that section with a half-inch bead next. We'll cut deep into it because it's one of the smaller sections of this piece. Now we move the tool rest yet again because it just gets too dangerous to have so much tool unsupported. Then we move in a little further so we can use the 9/16 gouge on these deep coves. And just like before, we engage it and try not to let go as we go in while moving our left hand to the right. Now we move up the piece a little bit, and we're going to give ourselves a little room to work on this big bulbous section in the middle. We part off a big section above it and remove some material so we can get to it better. Then we use our 9/16 gouge to cut the upper side of the bead. We could use the skew, but it's such a huge curve, sometimes a gouge feels better. Then we come back with the skew and do the lower side, which is much shorter. And then back to the left side of that bead again, we've cut a little deeper with the parting tool so we can finish off that large bulbous section. We're going to leave that momentarily and work above it to get down to dimension further. Can't really finish off that section until we do the section above it. So more tool rest position changes, more heavy removal of stock with the roughing gouge. This thing is going to weigh a lot less when we're done. And this is real cutting, real-time cutting, folks. It's not speeded up or slowed down, just so you know. We'll get the diameter at the top to where it will finally be. We put our 24-inch tool rest back on so we can work on the whole top section a little faster. Now we go back and work on finishing up that middle section by parting off details above it. More tool rest position changes, and then we'll cut that cove above that bulbous middle section with the gouge. Then just above that, the other 1/2 inch bead and a large flute that we cut with a detail gouge. Detail gouge has more of a long point to its curve, so it works better on details. Then we shape the bead with a skew scraping cut. The top of the bead we're going to expedite and give it a scraping cut because the bulbous section is in the way for a shearing cut. Now moving up the piece again and moving the tool rest again, we'll part off more detail, remove more stock with a roughing gouge. We're measuring to get dimension for that last large bead up toward the top. Now outlining another section. Then another tool rest move, we part off another section. And now parting off another section, you'll see where we're going here in a second. We're using a 9/16 gouge to get this section down to its dimension. Then we're taking one last cut with a parting tool to get down to the smallest diameter of the cove that we'll cut next. So where we are now is that 2-inch wide shallow bead above the middle section. We'll form that cove, the one above it, and move on to other details. Now we'll form the cove above that large bead with a detail gouge. After that, in another tool rest move, we're going to do the same to that final cove way up the top. It's a deep cove, so it takes a few passes. Then we can finish off both the large bead and the smaller ones. With the skew, we first do some shearing cuts on both sides, and then we blend those cuts together with gentle scraping cut. And yet another tool rest move, and more shear cuts with the skew to form that last large bead. Then we blend all those cuts together with a gentle scrape with the skew. If you don't push too hard here, you won't knock out big chunks that you have to sand out. There's a little cove right above that large bead that we can do with a detail gouge real quick. Now we backtrack a little bit and pick up details below the middle section. There's that last cove just below our largest section that we'll do. 9/16 gouge works pretty well for this because it has a longer handle for strength. It's a pretty deep cove, so it takes quite a few passes. We do that one last bead with the skew and blend our cuts with a light scrape. Then just above that, we finish off that large deep cove by making it into a huge flute with an opposing cut. Just like that. And that's all the cutting, folks. And then we sand and sand and sand. Sand all the large details and the large flats with 60 grit first to get out all the bad tool marks. Then we go on to 80 grit and then 120. On a piece like this, even though it's mahogany, since it's an exterior piece, we won't go to 220 like we would on an interior stain grade piece. And that's it. This piece has a large round mahogany top on it and is spar varnished for exterior use. And that's how it's done.